This is the third of a series of 4 linked podcasts that are taking you through the planning stage of the question that you're looking at there. The impact of the First World War merely heightened existing social and political tensions which had divided Germany before 1914. How far do you agree? The first 2 podcasts have taken you through 2 essays by Stephen Lee, which targeted at separate parts of that particular question. This third podcast, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the introduction. Now, the introduction is in many ways the most important part of an essay. It's the part of the essay in which you are really setting up your line of argument, and most importantly, it is the part of your answer in which you show that you understand what the underlying purpose of the question is. Now, with this particular one, again, look at it carefully, okay? It's asking you to assess the significance of the First World War. In what ways did the First World War change things? What you need to get across in your introduction is an understanding of how that question fits into the controversy, the debate. You're always going to be asked in history a question which the answer will divide historians. There's no right or wrong answer. So in your introduction you're showing an awareness of what the question is really about. Now, this particular question is about the impact of the First World War. What exactly does that mean? Well, what I would be looking for as the examiner with this question is the following understanding. Okay, things that before 1914 tensions had been building in Germany. We know with hindsight that at the end of the First World War, 1918, the Kaiserreich, the Second Empire, the Second Reich, whatever you want to call it, collapsed. Germany, as a result, became a republic. So what the question is really about, beneath it all, is what caused the collapse of the Kaiserreich in 1918. And this question is asking you, was it primarily caused by the events of World War I, or was it something that was going to happen anyway, even if there hadn't been World War I? So there's 2 possible lines of argument here. The first is this: World War I was the major cause. If there hadn't been a World War I, if Germany hadn't gone to war in 1914, the Kaiserreich might have survived. That's obviously one line of argument, in which case you're putting more emphasis on the events of World War I and causing the underlying tensions. The other line of argument is this: there were significant underlying tensions that had been building up before World War I and that were there in 1914. World War I did not cause the collapse of the Kaiserreich. What World War I did is it accelerated the collapse of the Kaiserreich. The suggestion here is that even if there hadn't been World War I, the Kaiserreich would have collapsed anyway. Those tensions that were in existence before 1914 were mounting, and there would have been a collapse of the Kaiserreich anyway, even if there hadn't been World War I. Therefore, the events of World War I did not cause the collapse of the Kaiserreich. They merely accelerated its collapse. They made it collapse sooner than it might have if there hadn't been World War I. So that's the sort of debate. That's the importance of the question, and that's what you've got to try to get across in your introduction. Now, your introduction has got to be very concise. It's got to be very focused, but it's got to show an awareness of what the introduction of what the essay question is about. Moving on. When I was at school many years ago, 30 odd years ago, 35 years ago actually, I had 3 A-level history teachers, and they were very, very influential on me. They obviously made me love history so much I wanted to do it at university and to teach history. Mr. Cloake, Mr. Harrison and Mr. Crinian. They subsequently wrote a book called The History Manual, which was a book about how to write about study skills for A-level history. Now, I have scanned the whole book, I'm sure they'll forgive me for that, and uploaded the whole book in separate chapters to a folder in Frog. So when you go to the Articles and Chapters folder, you'll find a subfolder called the History Manual, and in that you'll find separate PDF documents for each chapter. I want you to go to that folder and download the chapter called Essay Writing. Now, I've put the relevant pages into the podcast. As you can see, it's pages 91 to I think pages 94 of the book, and it's the particular section of that chapter on essay writing which is about how to write an introduction. And I was taught how to write introductions in this way. I'll leave you to read this yourself. I'm not going to take you through it in detail other than just to highlight one or two important parts to you. Okay. So zooming in on the first page here, I just want to emphasise that bit there. The introduction is in many ways the most important part of the essay. Okay. There's an extract a bit further down from the examiner's report about the importance of an introduction. I know it's a long time ago, it's 1979, but nevertheless it still holds true. What they've done here is they've given an example of a bad introduction. This is what I often call a scene setter. It just simply gives a bit of information to get the answer going, but it doesn't really do what the introduction is supposed to do. So that's the first page, just one, and the bit at the top of the next page is a key part. Okay, what they basically advise you to do is almost like an introduction. If I was to draw it as a diagram, it's almost like an inverted triangle, where the first part of the introduction is what we call an assessment of the topic. That's where you show your understanding of what the question is about. Then the middle part of the introduction introduces your line of argument, the approach you're going to take throughout your answer. And then the final part of the introduction acts as the transition to the main body of your answer. So a transition to your first paragraph proper. Now, they have suggested that you try to write 2 sentences for each of those parts. They also say, and you can see it underneath, that the total of 6 sentences is an arbitrary figure. It doesn't have to be, it's just a guidance. But nevertheless, so you could do it, for example, in 3 or 4 sentences. But it's that idea of 3 separate parts to your introduction that's the key part. What they then do is they give examples of introductions, breaking it down into the different parts. So here you've got a question. It doesn't really matter that you don't know anything about this topic. It's 16th century Europe, but nevertheless the principle is still the same. How much unity did the reign of Ferdinand and Isabella bring to Spain? And they give an example of how that introduction broken into 3 separate parts. Obviously you write it as a whole paragraph. That's a competent one. This one here, more high-powered, more challenging, but very effective to the same question. So read those, get a sense of what introductions are like. And then there's another one. It's a question about Cardinal Wolsey. And again, it gives you an example of a good introduction. So get a sense of that. Bear in mind what I said earlier. This question is ultimately about, was World War I the key driver of change? Did World War I cause the pre-existing tensions that were within the Kaiserreich to become so significant that the Kaiserreich collapsed in 1918, suggesting that the Kaiserreich might have survived if there hadn't been World War I, or the other point of view is actually it would have collapsed anyway, and all that World War I did was accelerate a pre-existing trend. That's the sort of essence that you need to try to get across when you write your introduction. Make sure you get historical knowledge into it. Okay, that's important. Try to make it interesting. Get at least one good fact into your introduction. But the introduction, a good essay has a strong introduction that sets up your answer. So make it a target to really produce a good introduction for this particular question. I'll leave it at that. There's one more podcast, and the next podcast will take you through a suggested plan for this particular question. Thank you.